Hi there, this is the Helium for Hasura Starter Kit with a metadata DSL and inbuilt authentication. So let's start with the punchline. Here's a complete classic to-do app written out where a user has many tasks. Specify the database connection, the database migrations, the user model, and the task model, and this actually defines the complete application. The permissions, which includes the predicates and the columns, are specified in code, so we get some interesting code reuse patterns. And we also get some good defaults like the primary key definitions. Now, this gives us an API which I've used to add some seed data. And once the seed data is there, we can actually test it out. Here's a simple query, and here's some tests for permissions. Let's see if we can get the first user and all that user's tasks. And there we have it. Getting started with the Hasura Starter Kit is really fast and easy. Clone the repository, bring up the Docker services. The app container already has the command line tooling and your application code volume mounted into the container. Create your application schema, the model definitions, and then compile and deploy. Your API is now up and running. Enable the inbuilt JWT-based authentication server by uncommenting a few lines in the Docker Compose file. Create a Postgres schema, which is a namespace for the authentication tables, and import a Hasura metadata module that configures Hasura to work with the authentication schema. You can now configure role-based permissions on your models. Coming back to the to-do app, let's add a feature that allows a task to be shared with another user. So here's the database table. Let's look at the models. The relationships and permissions have been updated. But let's focus on the tasks model. Now we say managing a task is either inserting, updating, or delete permissions on the model. And a task can be managed if it belongs to a particular user. Our task.userid is the signed in user ID. But a task can be seen either if the signed in user can manage it or if it has been shared with the signed in user. And because predicates are defined in code, you can now refactor them, you can compose them. For instance, permissions based on user flags, or you can even do more interesting things like allowing a user who's completed more than 100 tasks to do something different. And the cool thing here is we're not yet thinking about what sort of queries the clients will run against our data, because really there are only so many degrees of freedom, or perhaps affordances that the model provides, which means if you specify a few key things at the right layer, you can then leave generating an expressive API to an engine like Hasura. The DSL actually generates Hasura metadata, which feeds neatly into Hasura's battle-tested code-first workflows to use in integration testing, deploying to multiple environments. I think it's a really fun way to describe the data, and then you get your API for free. Stuff to build next: default scaffolding with data introspection and TypeScript support for additional Hasura features like actions. What should building applications look like? What's the best version of that? Share your thoughts on GitHub issues.